right. Greetings, one and all. Welcome. Thanks for taking some time during your busy Wednesday before the fantastic holiday. Hopefully, all of you have great occupancy and all of your plans are coming into play so that you can focus on what we do best, which is taking care of our guests and owners and the properties and everybody that's there. So, welcome to the VRNation webinar series. My name is Dirk Johnson. I am a board member and currently the secretary for the association. Longtime VRNation participant member, and just thoroughly love connecting and meeting with everybody that comes around. So excited today to have Evan and Pedro with us. They are the gurus of gurus on this side of the fence. And so looking forward to hearing their expertise and what's taking place there. So before we go to the next slide, Evan and Pedro, I have two questions for you. First question, if you could travel anywhere in the United States, where would you go? And I will answer that question as well. And what is your favorite ice cream?
Ooh.
So I'll start. So if I could go anywhere in the United States, I would go back to Alaska. Can't wait to go back. And my favorite ice cream would be vanilla. With
Okay,
or
so it's not
French
somewhere you haven't been before. It's
Well,
it's
it could be,
anywhere.
it could be, it could be. I just want to go back to Alaska. It could be.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
So
Man, that
Evan,
is such a hard one, Dirk, because I have so many places I love. I will probably go with somewhere I have not been but have been wanting to go, which is either Nantucket or the Hamptons. Now, ever since
okay,
I moved to Tennessee from California, I've started to vacation more on the East Coast, whether it's down in Florida or up in like Maine. We've been in New York, other places, but I have not yet been to the Hamptons or Nantucket or any of those islands. So I would certainly love to go there. From an
okay.
ice cream perspective, I'm an ice cream lover. I could name a million, but I would say as a kid, I always loved cookie dough. That was always my
Keto,
favorite.
right. Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Mr. Pedro?
All right, so I spent a lot of time snowboarding for a while before I had kids, and since my kids, I haven't been able to get out to the mountains a lot, and now my oldest is 7 and my middle one is 5, and we started going out to the small dinky mountains near Illinois, where I live now. So if I could travel anywhere in the U.S. right now, I'd go hit up like Park City, Utah, or something like
Ah,
that, and get some snowboarding runs in, kind of get back to that old snowboarding shape I used to be in. Ice cream, similar to Evan, I spent a lot of time living in Vermont, and Ben and Jerry's is the
ah,
company that rolled out chocolate chip cookie dough for the first time, and I have a friend who actually owns the company that makes the cookie dough that goes
really?
in Ben and Jerry's chocolate chip cookie dough. So uh, I'm partial to cookie dough like Evan.
There you go. Excellent. Excellent. Outstanding. Well, if you'll advance it one slide for me, let's take just a moment and talk about VR Nation, who we are. We are by property managers for property managers. We're looking to provide education content that meets you where you're at so that you're able to get the actionable items and to have the knowledge and information you need so you can make the best decision you can. And then our focus again is trying to help whether you're a property manager or a for rent by owner, one property, two properties, or 500 properties. We're trying to maximize. We're trying to curate our content so it meets you and matches you, and so you can best succeed in your endeavors and your passion of hospitality and short-term or vacation rentals. So with that, Mr. Evan and Mr. Pedro, we'll turn the virtual keys over to you and let you run and educate us about how we can best understand what's going on with our properties.
Thanks, Dirk. I appreciate it. I'm having a hard time not thinking about ice cream right now.
Well,
Get back to the topic at
you
hand here,
know,
which is talking about Summer OS. But yeah, thanks for the warm introduction, Dirk. We're certainly excited to be here. Any opportunity for us to get out in front of folks and share what we're doing is always an opportunity we'll take. So thank you to you and Heidi and the rest of VR Nation for giving us the opportunity to do so.
you're
I'm
welcome.
Evan. I'm the head of sales over here at SummerOS, based in Tennessee. I live just south of Nashville in the Franklin area. from California originally, but moved out here about 3.5 years ago. Certainly loving the lifestyle we live. So yeah, so let's discuss quickly kind of why we're here. I'll get into a little bit of an agenda, and we'll pass it to my colleague Pedro here at some point as well. But just want to kind of give everybody a little bit of a backstory of kind of how we came to be and who we are. Summer as a business actually started about 4 years ago, and we didn't start as a software provider. We actually started as owner operators and managers of short-term rentals. We touched every aspect of the business from acquiring properties to renovating them to managing them to everything, right? Everything you could possibly imagine. And we did that pretty successfully. But throughout our tenure of operating these properties, there were a lot of problems we kind of ran into, and there wasn't a technology provider or a group of technology providers that really solved for these issues we kept running into. The first one being understanding what a property is really going to return. So, short-term rentals are unique assets, as we all know, being in this industry. They're one of the hardest to pinpoint revenue production. There wasn't really a great way for us to look at a property and understand what it would return if put into service as a short-term rental. There's a lot of data providers out there, a lot of different services. But we kept running into the same problems, which was this data was high level. It was maybe market specific, not necessarily asset specific. We were having to cobble together a bunch of different things to try and come up with an estimate. And most of the time, these revenue projections were just inaccurate, right? Over and over again, we were finding we were inaccurate. We weren't really able to put a pin on what we wanted to do and what the property could return. And so it led to a lot of properties down the line. And then secondarily, the other thing we kept running into was there just wasn't an easy way for us then to track our existing revenue performance against that projection and against competitive sets, right? If you don't know how you're performing against others in the market or against your projection, how could you possibly be able to maximize revenue? So for us, that led to issues, obviously, of underperforming properties, as well as sometimes disappointed owners in the portfolio as well, wondering why their property is not doing so well. So throughout all of that, we were able to create a solution that kind of solved for that. Pedro, will you go to the next slide? And while you do that, if anyone in the chat has run into any of those similar problems, just go ahead and throw a thumbs up in there. Dirk, have you ever run into any of those problems in running your business?
Yeah, trying to match, trying to better understand how the performance is, not only against similar properties inside my portfolio, but also how am I performing in the marketplace.
Yep.
We try to differentiate ourselves as we all do because we're all unique and we operate differently. At the same time, trying to compete against other guests and other property management companies is tough. And so you want to make sure that you're able to hold on to the revenue and the properties that you want to hold on to.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, it's a problem we all face, right? It's not one that was unique to just us, and that's why we made the strategic shift to go from an asset business to a software solution. We started calling some of the folks in the industry we knew, kind of pressure testing this technology we had built, and got a lot of great feedback and decided to make the shift. So about 6 months ago, we officially launched SummerOS and turned into a SaaS business. And we're trying to solve for those exact problems I mentioned, like being able to find a way to quickly and accurately create revenue projections, understand what markets are doing and what properties actively listed are returning, as well as being able to actively optimize our revenue in real time and be able to track it against those projections we work so hard to build, as well as what our competitive set in the market is doing. And what I love about SummerOS is we can really benefit through a single platform so many different areas of a vacation rental management company. When you think about it at an ownership level, to Dirk's point, right? It's like how can we continue to grow top line revenue, whether that's acquiring new properties we know are going to perform well or optimizing the performance within our existing network? How are we going to avoid churn, make sure owners aren't leaving our portfolio because our properties are underperforming? And then we can also touch two aspects from the operational perspective, which is your sales team going out and acquiring new properties.
Evan,
Yes, go ahead, Dirk.
I would also say it's important to show that when we are succeeding to our property owners.
It's exactly
You know,
right.
I have one now that says, well, my May seems down, but I look at it and January's up, February's up, April's up, May's up. And so the perception is he's down, but the reality is if you look at the entire year, he's up year over year by five, $6,000. So being able to articulate that in a way that makes sense to the property owner is important to my relationship of I'm professional and I have this information to help you succeed.
That's 100% true. And the same can be on the other side, right? So let's say your property is missing its number for whatever reason, right? You projected a certain revenue figure for the month of May, maybe the property is 5% under. But if you're not then comparing it to the comparable properties in the market, what if those comparable properties are 15% below? So you're still outperforming the market. So maybe at that point, it's more of a macroeconomic situation and less of a property specific situation. So without the data and insights, you can't have those conversations with your owners, to your point, Dirk. Yeah, and then lastly, we benefit the sales teams and the revenue team. So on the sales side, right, you're out having conversations, trying to bring more properties into the portfolio. Oftentimes, again, it's hard to really find a great way to build those projections and convince someone to join the fold. With us, we give you the opportunity to build those projections accurately and efficiently and be able to deliver them in a really beautiful term sheet that can be branded to your vacation rental management company. And then on the revenue management side, giving you those real-time insights to be able to operate more proactively rather than reactively. So you're maximizing performance, growing top line revenue, and keeping those owners happy. Pedro, if you go to the next slide. Cool. So here's what we'll cover today. At this point, I'm going to be passing it over to Pedro. He's going to go through a few things about setting some revenue goals, creating real competitive sets and market analysis, performance tracking insights, and then we'll try and save some time at the end for Q&A. One thing I do want to point out before I hand it over to him is we have a great special going on for being a part of this webinar. You can get quite an extensive discount on SummerOS should you decide to move forward at any point. You can get a 50% discount for the first 3 months. We'll have a QR code, which you can also see here at the end of the presentation, that you can use to book time with me to opt into that benefit. But for now, feel free to keep that in your back pocket. If we kind of stoke up enough interest today, would love to have a conversation with you about how we can support your business. At this point, I'll pass it over to you, Pedro. Feel free to take it from here.
Thanks, guys. Pedro Zavaios. I am now, I was the head of acquisitions at Summer when we were buying homes on our balance sheet and bringing on tons of homes onto our rental management platform. So I have looked at a lot of various vacation rental markets across the country, lots that you all probably know and very familiar with as well. But I've done a lot of underwriting, looked at every type of home, whether it's a condo unit, apartment unit, 2 bedroom up to 8 bedroom homes in various markets, and always trying to understand those gems and those particularities of how to turn a regular home that you may buy on Zillow or something into a really kick-butt short-term rental, and whether that means adding amenity packages or really honing in on the right bedroom count for any given market. But the webinar is called tracking STR performance to meet and beat your revenue goals. And I think that the first thing you have to think about is how are you going to set realistic revenue goals at the onset, right? I've seen a lot of managers and a lot of folks come to us when we were managing homes saying, I got this revenue projection from X, Y, and Z property manager, and they say my home's going to do $200,000. And we're like, this is not a $200,000 market for a 3 bedroom home without a pool. You're going to, realistically, we should set your revenue expectations around $100,000 or $125,000. So there's a lot of these revenue projections that kind of float around in space that seem to be coming out of left field or really out of nowhere without any really data-driven support. And for any hosts out there, or any managers that are bringing on homes, or any new investors out there, it's really important to understand the data behind any revenue projection that you may see, and frankly, why we built SummerOS in the first place when we were buying homes. So where does it all start? It all really starts with accurate data, as Evan pointed out earlier. When you're looking at a short-term rental market, whether it's a sub-market, a regional market, or a much greater, bigger picture view of the world of the U.S., you want to make sure that you're really honing in on data that's accurate. And what we use typically is we try to benchmark too, because we're looking to build short-term rentals or have short-term rentals that are active for almost an entire year. We'll make sure that we're looking at data that's been quote unquote cleaned and interpreted properly in order to make sure that we compare ourselves to homes that are also active for almost the entire year, that are performing like a professional manager may utilize the home when there's not a ton of owner stays or things like that that might throw off the revenue projection. So that's one of the key things or key pillars of how we view in market intelligence. It's really starting off with accurate data. The second thing we really do is hone in on a true competitive set for any asset. And that competitive set is born obviously from the accurate market data. But with our tool, we built our tool to a SummerOS so you can go in with a subject home and build that competitive set around that home. And that's going to surface all the homes that might be similar to your home, not only on bedroom count and also size, but also on things um, like the amenities that it may have, whether it has great views, whether it has the pool, the hot tub, the game room in the basement. All those things are things that we're going to study and look deeply into and make sure that we give you the tools to build a competitive set that allows you to do that. Now, one really important thing about competitive sets is that as a manager, you might start to see folks coming in and asking you, "Hey, how much revenue would this home make if you were to take it on as manager?" And it might not have a pool or a game room or a fire pit or the deck. And you might say, "Well, look, if you make these improvements, this is where we think we can get your revenue based on the competitive set analysis." Now, they might say, "Well, what if I add a pool? Because, my husband and I are thinking about adding a pool next year. How much revenue would the home do if we added the pool?" Well, in that case, we built our tool so that you can create a different scenario and say, okay, here's a scenario with a pool, and here's a competitive set that is based on this home having a pool. And similarly, hot tub, game room, you can create multiple scenarios here and multiple revenue projections. So if you're a manager and you're trying to convince a host of what the revenue might make, and he might have multiple versions of what he might do to the home or the vision for the home, you can create those multiple revenue projections and scenarios within SummerOS, right? And that's a really important part about setting realistic revenue goals is to know what you're really matching up to on the vision.
Hey Pedro,
A
I'll
few other
pause you
things. Yep.
just for a second. We actually got I want to save most Q&A to the end, but we got a good question here in the chat that I think is worth going over as we're going through this. Jen had asked how our data differs from AirDNA.
Sure. So I don't know all the details about AirDNA's data, but our data is different. And what really differentiates about our data and how we go about surfacing data is that we pull data really from three different sources. One is third-party scrape data from Airbnb, VRBO, and other booking channels. We pull in a lot of first-party data as well, and then that we're able to source from different sources other than ourselves, as well as all the homes that are on our platform is another source of first-party data. But importantly, what we do is behind the scenes, and while it's all anonymous, so we never surface anyone's actual data. That's a really important part about our tool. What we do is we have a data scientist team that has created machine learning and other algorithms to ingest that third-party scrape data and have it be improved or learned, interpreted correctly using all the first-party data. Now, when you're dropping in or scraping data, one of the important things about it is that if you just surface the scrape data, frankly, you might end up kind of like where AirDNA is, right? You get what as a institutional investment person, sorry, my background has been in institutional investments, buying hotels and single family rentals, where we really relied on accurate data. When I used to use AirDNA when I started, what I found was that I was just getting results that just made no sense. I'd have one home doing 200,000, another home doing $50,000, but the $50,000 home was significantly better than the one they were telling me was doing 200 and had like a fantastic pool and a view. And I couldn't make heads or tails from the data. And that's really just a data cleaning and data interpreting problem. So what we did is we created our own version of that kind of scrape data that interprets and cleans that data in a very different way. It's proprietary to how we do it, using first-party data to improve and inform how we view that scrape data. So that's kind of how we surface the the data analytics that we see, or the foundation of the data that we show.
So I have a follow-up question to that, and that would be, I keep thinking of what my stats teacher taught me in college is that numbers lie, and you can take 2 + 2 = 5, and you can do all these fun things with numbers. And so as I think about what you've described, and I think about the numbers that I work with and see, and your first bullet point of accurate numbers and metrics, how do I know what data or what numbers I'm working with are telling me the truth? How do I triangulate those to make sure that I get a good, clear picture? Because you mentioned, you got three sources of where you pull from, and I like to have, three different pieces of software providing metrics to me so I can kind of, because they all look at it in a different way. How do I apply my brain to see these numbers to say, hey, this is what I should pay attention to, and this I should act in this manner?
Yeah, so we've seen a lot of other folks kind of use that analysis where they're like, I'm going to go to revenue projection calculator one, revenue projection calculator two, and revenue projection calculator three, and kind of see where they're all pointing me to, and then figure out maybe all kind of land kind of like in between where everyone's pointing. That's a result of just having really crappy revenue projection calculators, right?
Okay.
Because like if you plug in an address, we always say, if you're going to plug in an address and you're going to have a calculator tell you how much revenue your home's going to make, you should just stop right there. Like in the short-term rental business, it just can't work like that because there's so many objective things that matter to revenue. Whether you have a view, whether you have great curated design and decor, whether you have great operations, what company might be managing the property, where exactly it's located. It's just not possible to plug in an address and get a revenue projection.
So many nuances, so many variables.
It's
Agreed.
exactly right. That's exactly right. And you if you rely on that version of just kind of taking everyone's pointing in a different direction, so you'll just kind of go with where like the middle is, like that's not a very accurate way of doing it. Certainly it wouldn't pass muster from an institutional investment perspective. Like I would never have been able to buy a hotel on that basis. The investment committee that I was before would just like show me the door and be like, that's just not the way it works. So what we do is we try to work on our tool and be your source for accurate revenue data, right? We don't want you going to four different places. And so how can you verify that? So we've had people when we go to conferences, they'll show up and say, all right, let me put this to the test. I own a couple condos in Cocoa Beach, Florida. Plug in this address. So we'd plug it in real time, we'd say, look, we see the two-bedroom condos that face the ocean here doing $60,000, and we see the two-bedroom condos that face the street, they're all doing 35. And they're like, yeah, well, we do 58 and 64 on the condos that we own, right? And then we'll verify those amongst different markets. And that's what we're after. And really, if you think about it, that's just another way of using first-party data to help inform our third-party data, our scrape data, right? And that's what we're constantly doing in the background with our data sources, is constantly learning, constantly improving, constantly understanding patterns. We can get into this if other people have questions, but it's a really interesting field of data analytics and kind of data scientist stuff. But I'll breeze through this slide for the rest of it. But a couple of really important things, like we're always going to kind of show you the metrics that really matter, right? ADR, occupancy, RevPAR, that's all par for the course. That's all table stakes when it comes to short-term rentals. We show you other things like the gross booking revenue versus the accommodation fare, right? Because cleaning fees make up oftentimes an important source of revenue. And we want to make sure we can show an owner what the accommodation fare portion of that revenue is and what the cleaning fee revenue of that portion is. Another difference with AirDNA, which AirDNA will always surface everything just on gross revenue with the cleaning fee lumped in, which is just like, from my perspective, it's like, that's not like, if you're going to call the gross revenue and divide it by the days booked and call that ADR, that's not really ADR, right? ADR is what you got for your accommodation fare, and then you got cleaning fee lumped on tops of that, which is a very low margin. And I know you could talk a lot about cleaning fees as well, but thinking about the market, right? thinking about amenities and thinking about how your home might be improved or the vision for your home based on the amenities that you see in the market. And what are the amenities that are popping in that market that are really generating revenue? You want to try to match your home up to that. And then doing all your market analytics as far as trends in the long run. I'll kind of come back to this if anybody has specific questions. Just don't want to run out of time. Um, so diving a little bit deeper in the competitive set and market analytics, again, this is another big differentiator for our tool, SummerOS, but it's really a bigger picture idea, right? The idea here is that you're instead of plugging in an address into a calculator and having it tell you how much revenue you're going to do, which just it's just not the way the world works. What you want to do is be able to build a very strong competitive set around your subject home. This is fundamental to real estate in almost every other asset class, right? And in short-term rentals, someone came up with this idea of like plugging in an address and getting a revenue projection. It's like, no, you need to understand if my home has amazing views or sits on the waterfront or has a great hot tub, a game room in the basement, and really outstanding design and decor, I want to compare myself to other homes that have that game room in the basement, the outstanding design, the hot tub, and the great outdoor space, the resort style backyard. Those are the homes you want to compare yourself to in order to decide how you're going to line up in that peer group. And once you've set that peer group, you start to realize that you're able to set much more accurate revenue projections when you have some homes are doing a little better than you, some homes are maybe doing a little bit worse than you on design, decor, amenities, and you're kind of slotting yourself somewhere in the middle, or maybe you're outperforming that set because you just have the most outstanding home in the market. But at least you could benchmark yourself to a group of homes and actual revenue from those homes. So that's a really important part of coming to an accurate revenue projection. So then you tie those in with the market analytics and figuring out where you want to go with amenities and where you want to land, how much you want to spend, and decide kind of what your vision for the home is. Slot yourself in again. And so if you were to use SummerOS, you'd have the ability to create multiple revenue projections based off of different scenarios. So with pool, without pool, with hot tub, without hot tub, with hot tub and game room and pool, or any multiple of those scenarios, which you could extrapolate out and you could have the ability to create different versions. If you're trying to win a deal, you can show an owner, a potential owner, a potential client, those different scenarios and help them convince on what the vision for the home should be. So once you've set your revenue projections, remember now you turn what we always say is we have to turn those revenue forecasts or those revenue projections now into revenue goals. And it's not just about the annual revenue goal, right? We might say we think this home might do 100,000 in 2025, but we need to know how are we going to get to that 100,000 from January to December. There's seasonality in any given market, and you want to understand what revenue goals. If you're trying to get to 100,000, what revenue goals should you try to meet from January to December on a monthly basis? So we want to turn revenue projections into revenue goals, and now we hand this property over to our revenue managers because the home is now live on Airbnb. All that work that we did to project revenue, create a competitive set, we cannot lose sight of that work. That work now in our tool, SummerOS, transfers right over to now your asset management tool, which is if I think I'm going to get $100,000 in 2025, my revenue manager needs to know what target revenue he needs to gun for every month in order to make sure we're on track to hit that $100,000. So what we like to track performance by looking at the revenue goal that we set when we first brought on this home, or we may have changed after we saw it go live, to our actual revenue. And then when we originally set that $100,000 projection, we based it off of, say, a 15 home competitive set. We don't want to lose sight of that competitive set. So we're also tracking the average revenue of the competitive set on a month-to-month basis. So when we track asset performance from a short-term rental perspective, we're really looking at three key things: the revenue goal, the actual revenue, and the competitive set revenue. And as Evan alluded to early on in the presentation, now that we have that, we could start to unpack what's going on a month-to-month basis, as well as last month, last quarter, year to date. As you pointed out earlier, was that we said, well, we may have had a bad April. Maybe we're down 10% in April, but the last 12 months we might be up 5%. So we want to know which homes we need to pay attention to because when I was in the hotel world, our asset managers, they had one job, right? And that was to be 60 to 90 days ahead of any trends in all the hotels that we owned. If they started seeing things going sideways or going down, they needed to alert and change course correct 60 to 90 days ahead before we actually were deep in a hole and in a problem. Similarly, in the short-term rental world, we want to be able to analyze trends and say, this home is not quite hitting its goals for the last 3 months or the last 2 months. What's going on with it? And so what we call is unpacking the variance, right? We like to see all the homes bubble to the surface that are not performing by more than 5%, let's say. And of those homes, we want to say last month, last quarter, last 6 months, last 12 months, how are those homes actually performing? And then we let the software, SummerOS, tell us which homes actually need attention and might need some course correction, whether it's on your pricing strategy, your operations, cleaning issues, review issues, or just refreshing amenities. And that's kind of how we're able to go from a revenue projection to accurate revenue goals and then tracking against those revenue goals in order to maximize revenue. So going to stop there in case we have any questions. We do have a very quick case study I can show you quickly. We had a home in Akron, New York. This is drive-to distance from New York City. It was a very solid home. It had great views, great potential. But when we took on this home as managers, the owner came to us. It was already an active short-term rental, and they say, 5 different people have told me this home's going to do $130,000 in revenue, and we were like, well, we see some things that could potentially be improved, and we kind of took over management and operations before we had full-blown SummerOS ready to go. But it had a lot of good things going for it, but it did have some obstacles, and importantly, like the analysis that the owners had done to kind of tell us what they thought the revenue could be was just not based on accurate data. The market analytics were off. The revenue they were comparing themselves to wasn't accurate. So they did not have good expectations, solid, well-supported expectations when they brought that home to us, right? So we started operating the home in 2023 and we're like, look, we're trying to line up to your revenue goals here, but like even though we have great reviews, 5-star reviews, a lot of happy guests in that home, like we're not going to achieve that revenue goal that you provided us when you first showed up with the home. Like we're doing well. The home has potential and could do better, but those revenue expectations are off. That accurate data, not accurate data, set you up for essentially failure because you had poor month-to-month revenue expectations. So we put it through the system into SummerOS, and we started to build a competitive set around that home. And we started to hone in on what improvements could we actually make if we're trying to maximize revenue that we called high impact, low cost improvements, right? When we look at the competitive set, we said there's probably 5 or 6 things you could do to this home that don't cost a lot of money, but can elevate you into this competitive set and therefore let you achieve, a significantly more revenue than you've done in 2023. So when we put it through SummerOS, we built those competitive sets, we understood the market, we presented it to the homeowner, and we said, these are some of the key improvements. Change that downstairs basement from just kind of a sitting room that no one really knows what to do with into a really fantastic ping pong room and game room with darts and ping pong. Make it fun, make it lively. Turn that kind of boring 3-season porch into something a little bit more highly curated design. Turn your hot tub that kind of right now is presenting with the cover on and kind of like drab and lonely and not fun into something that really shows a really fantastic outdoor hot tub experience, and turn that fire pit that looks uncomfortable and doesn't celebrate the views into something really fantastic, among a few other things. These are just some examples, but we upgraded these homes based on the analysis we were seeing in SummerOS, right? SummerOS was able to bubble this to the surface and say, if you could check these boxes, you're going to be north of $100,000 in accommodation fare. So lo and behold, we went live with those improvements in April, and immediately the home just took off and started hitting its revenue projections. 31% year over year growth from May to December. We were doing over $100,000 in accommodation fare, over $125,000 in gross revenue, including cleaning fees. It was a remarkable turnaround by nailing those kind of what we called high impact, low cost improvements. But all of this was based on an analysis that we can see based on SummerOS. And now, how are we tracking all this stuff? Right, we were tracking it, and I'll just quickly show you a snapshot here of what SummerOS looks like. Like this would be a portfolio of homes that you may have. Everything's tracked here. Everything is going to be tracked as far as which homes are doing well, overperforming, underperforming, more than missing its goals by more than 5%. But importantly, once you're live, here are those kind of three lines. I'll try to zoom in a little bit here, but you can start to track your projected revenue against your actual booking revenue and against that competitive set on a month-to-month basis to really hone in and unpack the variance. What months did I not hit my revenue goal? How did I do against my competitive set? And importantly, as Evan talked a little bit earlier before, you're basing it off of your original revenue goal. So this is actually the base case term sheet that the tool SummerOS allows you to very quickly create these term sheets. So you create your comp set, it generates a term sheet for you so you can download this and send it off to an owner really quickly. But you can see that these were the revenue projections that we were trying to hit. And now these turned into revenue goals that we're tracking against on a month-to-month basis. So going back to the deck here, we can start to wrap up with some key takeaways. Evan, if you want to nail these.
Yeah, no, thanks, Pedro. I appreciate that. Yeah, just some key takeaways. I think pretty obvious. Yeah, building reporting into a single view. So your teams across revenue, sales, ownership, leadership can all kind of be able to understand how your properties are performing on a month over month, year over year basis. Being able to review and benchmark in real time, using performance insights to make proactive decisions about your portfolio, and of course, being able to track that performance. So you can go to the next slide, Pedro. Cool. So we'll stop here. I'll leave this up for now so you can scan the QR code if you're interested in learning more. But we'll stop here for Q&A. If there's any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and we'd be more than happy to answer them before we go. I don't see any more in there right now, so feel free to put some in. Dirk, if you have a question in the interim.
So I have a question. So as we start to leverage your expertise and to someone who's a new or somewhat a new or a seasoned property manager, how would one begin to utilize data to better assist them in making decisions? I recognize, we deal with numbers every day. We've got our KPIs, our adjusted RevPAR, adjusted ADR, all those things that go with that. How do we then take the next step in this curating process of numbers so that I can have a clear sense of what I'm doing as opposed to the fuzzy picture that I portrayed to you earlier?
Yeah, Pedro, I'll let you take that one.
Yeah, sure. So I think when it comes to data analysis and data analytics, like one thing that it's really hard to do is to get to meaningful and accurate conclusions or insights, Dirk, without having a tool to help support you do that, right? So the first thing, if you're trying to download data or, worse is just plug in an address into a calculator and have it try to tell you what to do. Like even if you triangulate three different people, you're just getting, three different not great revenue estimates. So you're going to end up, in a not great situation as far as a revenue estimate. So what we like to do is have people use our tool, which essentially, as I show you on the demo here, it's really cut out to keep things pretty straightforward and simple from the perspective of trying to create a new projection, right? So What our tool does is it kind of it kind of puts people in the driver's seat or users in the driver's seat, but kind of guides them along the process of trying to make sense of all that data. It's not going to overwhelm you with a bunch of graphs. We're not a dashboard or some of these other tools that just kind of show you a million graphs. And you're like, well, I'm not a statistician. Like, I don't know how to interpret. Well, we're trying to say, you're trying to create a revenue projection. Let's click on the new projection button. Let's get to a really great competitive set, as you could see here. Let you understand the market from a competitive set perspective and click around and see what homes might actually line up to your home. Understand those homes, see where you might fit in that competitive set, and then allow you as the driver of the tool to really set your numbers here, right? So you can, like I said, this is the base case, but you can create a different case here we might call, Dirk's case. And Dirk, you might be super optimistic and bullish about this. So you might say, look, the base case is 105, but I really think this is going to be a $130,000 booking revenue home. And I'm going to target my occupancy keep my occupancy at 65, but I'm going to nail this at 130, right? And how am I going to get there on a month-to-month basis? Well, our tool says, well, we're going to look at all the data and help you out, Dirk. We're not going to make you try to interpret a bunch of data. We're going to say, we've done all that work in the background. And if you think we think you're going to get, or you think you're going to get to 130, well, here's how the data is going to help support you get to that 130. This is where the data-driven analysis is telling you how you might get there month to month. And then you say, well, I want to see a 3-year forecast of this. And it's going to say over the next 3 years, here's how you will achieve and grow your revenue over time, right? And then again, if you were a manager and you were trying to win this deal, Dirk, what you would do is take all that work you just did and create a term sheet here that now focuses on that $130,000 revenue projection that you call, I should call this Dirk's case, not Dirk case, Dirk's case here. And now you have Dirk's case here that you might want to send out and try to win this deal based off. But again, you can see how we went very quickly just now, Dirk, from hitting the revenue projection button, getting a comp set, forecasting out what we think we're going to do. We could have an optimistic case here of 130, getting to a term sheet and trying to win this deal, right? Now, once this deal goes live and it's on your platform, you're now going to be here. That home's going to pop up in your portfolio of homes here. So you can track, again, that very important step in this thing, which is how did my home perform against its revenue goals in every given month it's been live? And how does it perform against the competitive set? Do I need to do anything to course correct if I need to do it?
Yeah, and I would say just to even simplify it down to like very elementary terms here, like we're trying to avoid what has persisted for a long time in the market, Dirk, which is your point of having to triangulate data from a million different places to come up with some level of decently accurate projections and give you one place to go step by step to build real comp sets with better data and be able to build good competitive projected revenue numbers that you can then track against. And then we plug directly into your PMS via integration. So all of that data is tracked in real time. So you're not having to have someone create these Excel spreadsheets with month over month projections and things like that. You're going to have the analysis at your fingertips, whether it's at a singular asset basis, whether it's at a subset of your portfolio, or whether it's your entire portfolio. You have all that analysis built in at your fingertips.
Great. Thank you.
Yep.
Excellent. Well, gentlemen, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and time today.
Thank you, Dirk. Pedro, if you don't mind going back to that slide real quick, just to give people one last opportunity to scan that QR code. Just want to, yeah, right there. Just want to make it evident again, like we do have a great deal going on. If you scan that QR code, book a demo with me. Happy to take you through the platform in more depth. We can understand your business, figure out how we can help you best. We have a great deal going on, 50% off of the first 3 months of a 1-year contract, pretty significant discount. So I think worthwhile. If this was any interest to you, please do reach out. Would love to have a conversation with you. I think at the end of the day too, we're new in the SaaS space, so it's always good to get feedback as well. So just have a conversation, get your feedback on the tool is always valuable as well. So feel free to reach out. We'd love to connect with you guys.
Excellent. Evan, Pedro, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you all. Thanks to VRNation.
Yeah. Sorry, say that again, Pedro.
I said thanks to VRNation. Thanks to everyone that joined.
Oh, you're welcome. And to the attendees, thank you for your time today. Thank you for attentiveness. Appreciate you being a part of the VR Nation webinar. If you're a member, this webinar will be recorded and available to you on the member side through the member portal, so you can go back and revisit that. And until then, have a great Memorial holiday and enjoy the weekend all. Take care. See ya.
Thanks, everyone.